All right, what's going on, everyone? This is Bert, the mentor guy, author of two books. Who's in Your Top Five, as well as my brand new book, Students with Mentors. But I'm not here for that. Today's not about me. Today we have someone I'm really excited to interview. We have Jullien Gordon, who not only is an internationally renowned speaker and corporate coach, but someone who's written over 5 books. How many books have you written?
Yeah, I don't know. The bookshelf is over there. That you can see them all over. Anyone where you see multiples, those are mine. I don't even keep count anymore, man.
Okay, because I know I have the interview.
Yep.
You
Interview,
have
8 Cylinders of Success, the birthday
the eight.
book, the career change challenge, guarantee goals, the high performer plan, the New Year guide. It's just, and then more in the works, man. Some of them are actually workbooks as well. So, for those of you out there, you may not need to write a book. You may need to just actually create a workbook. And so that's a whole nother conversation.
Right. But what we really wanted to do today is I'm really excited to have a conversation with you because there's a lot of people, especially towards the new year, who they have great content inside them. And maybe it's a matter of I just want to share my story. I've always had like these really great ideas. Or it might just be you're a blogger, you already have a following, and you're going to these conferences and you're thinking, man, how much more credibility would I have and how many doors would open for me if I had a finished book, right?
Yeah.
That I could present on, do workshops on, do speaking engagements on, or maybe you're a professional speaker looking to boost your credibility to get more engagements and higher paid speaking engagements because you actually have that product and that book out there, right? So,
Right.
there are very specific people who are listening to this conversation, and if you are one of those people, one of the things I'm passionate about is mentorship and kind of speeding up your learning curve. I think obviously there's a learning curve we all need to go through and learn from the mistakes, but if some of those are avoidable, let's
Yes.
definitely speed up the learning curve. So I want to frame this conversation, Jullien, about one, why you think it's important to be an author and how it's benefited you. And once we've gone to that, I want to talk about what were some of the hiccups, because you actually had a different experience than some of the folks that may be engaging with what we're going to be offering. But tell us, what's a benefit, and just personally from your life, like how has it benefited you to be a published author?
Yeah, well, straight up, man. Anytime I step into a new market, or I always usually start off with a book. And the reason I do that is because it does a couple of things for me. For instance, here's the 8 Cylinders of Success. This was the first one, and this book actually took me 3 years to write. This took me
Okay.
3 years to write, and the original title was "You Can't Google Purpose," and I reached out to Google to see if I could use their name in the title, and they said, "Hell no!" So I had to change the title. But this became the foundation of my work in terms of helping people get clarity on their life purpose and live out the lives that they want. And this took me 3 years. And then sometimes that's how the first one goes. Like the people say your first kid is the hardest as well, because it's a huge learning curve. But once I cracked this code, the next book came out in 30 days. Right. So I
Wow.
went from a 3 year cycle to publish this book to the next one actually coming out in 30 days because I started to get it. I understood how it worked and I understood what the purpose of a book really was. For me, when I'm entering a new market, anybody can go to vistaprint.com, moo.com and get business cards. They can get a logo on Fiverr for $5 and pretend like they're a business. But the thing that everybody's not willing to do and to differentiate themselves and establish themselves as an authority in their field is actually write a book. Even if nobody reads this book, this already looks like I'm an authority. Just like that. This book could probably be empty, right? It could be empty. And people would see it and see my name on it and they would think I'm an authority in it just because I got this thick document. And what a book did for me, it was a better
Perception.
business. Yeah, perception.
Yes,
Also,
perception.
it was a better business card. It was a better business card. You can go to vistaprint.com, moo.com and get business cards for $10. And so what's going to differentiate me from this person who says they're doing the exact same thing, where they went and got Vistaprint business card? What's going to differentiate me? And it was actually this, right? This was where the credibility and the perception came from. Also, for me, having a book, it helped me clarify my thoughts on my coaching practice and my business model. Going through this
Really?
process and having to organize it, right? Having it one created table of contents and then dig deeper into each one of those chapters. Once I was done with my book, I could speak powerfully about it from stage without having to reference it because I had gone through it, I had edited, I had wrote it out, I had dumped everything that was in my mind out onto a piece of paper. So it helped me
And
organize
organized.
my thoughts. Yeah.
Organized.
So
So that's
those are the
interesting.
two number one. Those are the two things. It's a better business card, and two, it helped me really organize my thoughts around this particular problem that the audience I was writing for had.
Man, that's great. I like that a lot because I think that so many times folks who are creators of content, there's so many good ideas, right? Oh, I want to talk about this, or I'm gonna put this quote and I'm gonna say this. And even if you're just speaking to people, even if you're a blogger, I think you're right. A book forces you to kind of narrow and focus those ideas in a very, very powerful way that you can refer to even as a roadmap for yourself and what you want to share with the world. So
Yes.
that's great.
Yes.
And so I think that, that's definitely a purpose driven answer. But in terms of, you said if you're entering a new market, and we talked about there's a perception that happens, right? When someone's an author and you're published and someone could look you up on Amazon or find your book on a website. How does that change the conversation when you go to a meeting to pitch yourself? How does that change the conversation when you go to a meeting to negotiate pricing for one of your services? I mean, is that
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. A couple things. One, a lot of people are authors now, or they claim to be authors. And the reality is that most people are not authors, right? So when you're going into a room and you're going to negotiate a contract or something like that, more than likely there'll be one or two authors out of this room of 5 people, right? And so that distinction alone just sets you apart. It conveys a level of discipline. It conveys a level of expertise. It conveys all these things just by the fact that you are now a published author. In terms of my speaking contracts, in some cases, they can double in size because they buy more books than they do speaking, right? Ooh. So if I'm going to speak at a college and there are 3,000 freshmen and they decide to buy the book for all the freshmen, then a speaking deal alone would have been this amount. But with the book deal attached to it, I'm actually selling more books than I did. I got more revenue from the books than I did from the speaking on particular deals, right? And so you can actually double your impact because now not only did they get inspired. See, I don't like to call myself a motivational speaker, because what happens when you go to a motivational speech? Everybody gets excited, inspired just for that moment, and 30 minutes after they leave, it's gone. But when they have a book, they have something to take with them, right? This actually can be with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, go look at your bookshelf. How many books have you dragged with you from high school or college because you were never letting that thing go, because there are highlights, there are notes in the margin, because that book has changed your life, right? This is the power of a book. It gives them something to take home with them so that they never forget the messages that you delivered.
Man, that's great, man. That's so great. And it's cool because someone could literally be walking with your book like a week later on the train and it's like, man, I feel like Jullien is talking to me right now. but it's powerful because people need to hear the message at different times in their life, because
they
might not be ready to receive you when you speak on stage, but there might be something that's very powerful about your message that maybe later on in that semester or later on, if they're just starting a new job and they're doing a different rotation and transitioning, maybe there's a point where they needed to read that exact quote or message and like, oh my gosh, I know Jullien said this 6 months ago, but I needed this right now. So I think, like you said, that impact for the folks out there, the purpose-driven folks who really want that impact, it stays, right? It stays with you, permanent impact. Now, I want to read to you a question. So we started this thing called Author Convos on Facebook, and we're doing a Twitter chat on Tuesday night at 8:00. And I just wanted to hear from people who want to write a book, what some of their pains around writing a book was. And Maria wrote, I wish I knew where to start. I have so many ideas. Starting can be overwhelming because writing for children can be challenging because you need to keep in mind how to keep their attention and hook their imagination. Now, I want to focus on kind of the higher level part of her question. Is this person seems to be a very creative person and is looking at all the steps at once. So if we had to simplify and kind of speak to her and unwrap that overwhelming part, what are some things that, you're starting out, these are some steps you should definitely do just to kind of streamline your starting out.
So this one is so powerful. I learned this from a storytelling organization that I did some training with, and they said, start with the last sentence. Start with the last sentence, right? Because now your book has an end, and now you just have to figure out, how do I get from this first blank page to the end? Because here's the problem, especially when we're writing nonfiction books, like a personal development book or a self-help book, is that you're constantly growing. And as you're writing, but you're constantly growing. And so the end keeps moving and moving and moving because you keep growing during the writing process. But if you actually begin with that last sentence, then you just have to figure out how to tell the story and write a narrative that's going to get me there. Yes, there may be more books inside you that you discover as you're writing the first book, but the first book has to get done. It has to have an ending. Just like a gymnast, when they're doing those turns and flipping in the air, you have to land it. In the same way, having the last sentence is a really powerful way of actually deciding that I'm landing this book. This is where it's going to end. And if I have to write volume 2 or volume 3, just like Jack Canfield, right? Chicken Soup for the Soul. He wrote number 1. And then when number 1 was done, he's like, oh, there's a couple more in here. And then I'm going to do this kind of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Then this kind of chicken. If he would have just said, I'm going to keep writing until I feel it's at the end, then Chicken Soup for the Soul would probably be this like 50,000 page document that is still unpublished. Right. And so I think beginning with the end in mind is so important when it comes to for this young woman, Maria, is just, starting with the end and then going from there. Yeah.
Starting with the last sentence. Now, I want you to, before we go into the next kind of question from one of the writers, I want to hear from you. What was the mistake you made just in terms of the logistics of writing a book? You said it took you 3 years the first time, 30 days the second time. So what are we learning?
My issue is I didn't consult any other authors before I actually wrote a book. I was just like, I'm going to research this and I'm just going to write, because I had a blog that was getting a lot of pop. And I said, some of these posts, if I weave them together, can be the starting point of a book. Right. And so I didn't really consult any other authors. I didn't know any actually at that time. And I wish I would have, because they would have saved me all kinds of time and energy and legal stuff. And so, my biggest mistake when I published this book, and this was in the early days before print on demand was hot. What happened was, in order to get them at the volume discount that I needed them to be in order to sell them, I had to buy 3,000 of them. Ooh. I had to buy 3,000 and I had to have inventory. And so I had boxes. Huh? No. And when I first wrote this, on demand, Amazon Create Space wasn't really popping like that. And so I had boxes and boxes and boxes of books in my apartment. And guess what? I had to move apartments twice in that period. That was the worst part of moving my apartment, is I bought all this inventory. Literally, Bert, I could make a couch out of all the boxes that I had, couch of book boxes. And if I had to do that all over again,
lady, like, you can sit on the books.
Yeah, you can sit on the books. Yeah, that's going to turn to cash soon, but you can sit on it while it's there. And so eventually it went from a 3-seater to a 2-seater to a love seat to actually being distributed and out there in the world. But it was a huge mistake. And I know that if I would have talked to other authors in advance, they would have saved me from making that huge mistake and considering other routes. I know Amazon Create Space wasn't there at the time, but there are probably other opportunities and routes that I could have taken. I also had a terrible printer. They were charging me for every edit and every change and the wrong file guidelines and things like that. And they would say, oh, that's $150 to resubmit your files and this and that. And so I went in thinking that I was going to be getting my book back for $3 and then I could sell them for 15 or 20. And by the time I was done with this publisher, not a publisher, but a printer that didn't have my best interest at heart, I was burning through all the margins that even buying at that volume would have produced. And so, I didn't talk to anybody. It was a huge mistake. And I would have got more advice in terms of legal, in terms of branding and trademarking and copywriting. I would have gotten more advice in terms of editing. I would have gotten more advice in terms of distribution. I've learned all those things now the hard way, but those are part of the reasons why this first book took me 3 years, because I wasn't just writing. I was trying to figure out all this other stuff too, right? I was trying to be a publisher and a writer, and that's a bad combination, right? Wow. You should do what you're great at and then access that information or that capital, that social capital, from other people who already know how to do these things. And so, what I'm hearing from you is, having had some of these guidelines and some of that guidance,
would have really freed you up to just focus on the content of the book, or maybe the look and feel, and things that as an author are, the domain where you could really shine. Because I'm hearing from you that, there were other people, other authors have obviously published books before you have.
Right.
So other people have experienced these type of things, and I'm hearing from you that maybe those conversations could have saved you maybe some money in terms of the printing, or
Yes, definitely.
saved you some
And
time,
time.
the logistics, and man, so that's such a powerful thing. I'm gonna get to another question, comment actually. So Felicia, when I asked, what was the pain point, or what's in the way of writing the first book, she said, her thing was writing a book that was too long was a waste of time. She said she wrote a 300-page book, and she waited to send it to an editor. She sent it until it was closer to the final draft, and she found out that for her market, really an 150-page book was appropriate. And she realized that, she wasn't writing to the wrong audience. So I don't know how much time that took her, but I want to get your feedback around how do you, if you're someone like Felicia, you don't have this information. How do you coach a Felicia around how long should your book be, and in terms of the writing process before you know who you're talking to? How would you help her as a Felicia type person who was starting out and trying to figure out, how do I avoid some type of mistake like that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, my books keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter. My first book was my longest book.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, they keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter because I have one idea that I simply want to flesh out. And my first book, I was trying to put all these ideas, and in fact, this could probably be broken up into 3 different books, right? And so I think people get hung up over length. I think people want this thickness, but the question is, does the audience want this thickness, right? So that's really first and foremost, is not getting caught up on the length, and just saying, what is it going to take to fully flesh out this idea so that this person can intake and fully ingest this idea into their life. That's it. We're not trying to give them a full encyclopedia volume on finding your life purpose or this and that. We're simply trying to give them enough to actually start to adopt the idea into their life. And then there may be other content that you wanted to put in the book that actually should go on your blog, or that should be a video that surrounds the book and actually you use as marketing tools for the book, right?
Or drive them to a website of additional resources from the book and use it as a lead generation tool.
Exactly, and use it as a lead generation. So it's a bonus to people who bought the book, but then it's also lead generation back to the book because you're going deeper in this area, but they have to go back to get the core concept first, right? And so, yeah, don't get hung up on length. Get hung up on finishing.
Yeah, I like this idea of getting hung up on finishing because
don't get hung up on. Oh, yeah, get hung up on finishing. Yes.
Yeah, this idea that progress is better than perfection.
Yeah.
And then any advice around authors, first-time authors, about the good enough point? Because I think I've seen this, and I've seen in some of the comments, just how do I know when it's ready, or what?
Oh, you and I talked about this, man. Life of Pablo, right? Kanye keeps editing that and putting it out, right? And guess what? That's okay. And what's beautiful about print on demand is that now, if you see an error in your book or you want to update something, for instance, I had an example of Lance Armstrong in my first book, right? No longer relevant, right? Because he was using drugs to accomplish what he accomplished, but I had referenced him. Guess what? I can simply go edit that, re-upload the PDF into CreateSpace, and all of a sudden my book is updated. And nobody knows because it was happening in the dark. Right. And so your book can actually still be evolving and nobody really has to know. It's not like the traditional publishers where they printed 50,000 of them and now you can't edit it. Now it's canonized. Right. And even still, some of the books that you bought, you'll see new edition. Right.
Thinking Grow Rich, latest edition, those type of things.
How do they put 1 million sold if that's the first edition? You can't. You can only put 1 million sold on it after you've actually sold 1 million, right? So there has to be a second edition that occurred. And so,
right. No, that's a very good point. And the whole idea about finishing is so. I'm only going back to it because one of my favorite quotes And one of the reasons why, and we're going to talk about the event that we're doing on Thursday later, but one of the reasons that inspired me and Jeff to do it is one of my favorite quotes is, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
And you've seen people like this at events. I've seen people like this at events. Oh, I've got this great idea for this book. It's about my life story, or it's about this experience I had that really influenced me. And 9 out of 10 times, if you ask that person, can you think of at least one more person who would benefit from reading that story? They can say yes, but they're caught up on the finishing. So, one question I had for you is, how do you handle those feelings of just getting your book out to the marketplace? The potential rejection, the potential criticism. Are there ways to get feedback ahead? Like, how do you handle that? Because it's an emotional journey for some people, right? How do you?
Oh, the hardest point of writing a book is when you send out 10 copies to friends to read your first draft, and they come back with all their edits, right? So the way I did it is I sent mine out to 10 friends, and then only about 6 of them actually took the time to read it, which was actually a bad signal for me that it wasn't compelling enough for them to finish. And people are busy, right? But then I sent them printed copies, so they were handwriting all of their feedback. And basically, when I got back all their feedback and aggregated it, it almost felt like I had to write another book, right? And so that's why people avoid it, and that's why people get stuck, because they're afraid of how people are going to receive it. For me,
you recommend it. You actually
you should do it. Oh yeah,
and get a small group of people to kind of look at it. Okay.
Yeah. And if you want to do that directionally before you actually pump out 300 pages like that young woman did, you can actually get feedback on the first 2 chapters and make sure you're even going in the right direction, right? So that you don't go write 6 or 10 chapters and realize that you were going off, right? So
that's test. So it's almost like a movie theater. Like when they did Star Wars, the new movie, they had test screenings, and based on the test screenings, they had reshoots. Because Disney's like, we want more humor in the movie, right?
Yes.
So you're saying something that we even see throughout other areas of pop culture, basically, like this idea of like, let's get it tested before we put it out there, and that's okay to do.
That's definitely okay. And the other thing is that not every idea that you have is meant to be a book. Some are just meant to be blog posts, and go in on that blog post and get it out there in the world. Not everything that you have and not every story inside you is meant to be turned into a book. Some stories just become a story that I use in my presentations. Some stories become a video on YouTube. Not everything is meant to become a book. And so if you feel like that story is inside you and is agonizing you, ask yourself, what is actually the best channel for me to get this story out? And it may not come out as a book.
Yeah, no, that's good. Being self-awareness, right? Self-awareness is such an important thing.
Yeah.
So one question I have for you is around writing techniques, because, or the discipline of writing, because a lot of people who I know who are working on books, they work full time. And unless you're like a full-time professional blogger, it can be challenging to carve out that space. I've heard people say, oh, I got stuck writing. What are some techniques, that you learned that you can share with folks who are just in that situation? Like, I'm working, I'm full time, I go home, I gotta, call my friend, significant other back, I gotta tuck the kid in, and then I have an hour, before I go to sleep. What would you say to those folks?
I keep coming back to this because this one was the hardest one, because I didn't know what I was doing. The first thing I did, though, to actually create space in my life for this and make sure that I was energized, was I switched my work hours from 8 to 5 when I was working full time to 6 to 3. And so I showed my boss that I could perform and I would deliver and that they could trust me. And so I just switched my work hours. So one, I got to work earlier. I was waking up earlier. From 6 to 8, nobody was bothering me. So I was more productive at work, right? So that's first. But then I would leave at 3. I would go home, take a nap, eat. And then I would wake up at 5 or 6 o'clock when everybody else was just getting off work. And I feel like I had a second wind, right? I would feel like I had a second day ahead of me. And I would write through the evening till I went to sleep. And that was simply by shifting my work day. The difference between 6 to 3 and 8 to 5 is no difference in terms of hours, right? And so, but it felt different because the sun was still out when I got home. I wasn't dog tired when I got home and giving my book the worst energy or my leftover energy.
Right.
So that
Leftover.
was yeah, and that's what we oftentimes do if you're have a full-time job or something, and you're giving your book your leftover energy. If you find you're a morning person or early bird, then you got to write in the morning, right? And the other thing is just write every day. I'll share one book that actually changed my life, and guess what? Your book will likely change somebody's life in terms of understanding this process. Was The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. The War of Art is absolutely amazing, but I share that hesitantly, and here's why: because I don't want you to go read it only to procrastinate on your book.
Yeah.
I share it as a resource if you're serious about getting over this block that you're having, but I do not want to share it just so you can procrastinate longer on your book by going and reading another book. Somebody actually needs to be reading your book right now, but it's not there yet. So I say that with the asterisk by it.
So here's an interesting question. What's a surprising thing that you learned? So let's bring the people back. 3 years to write the first book,
yes.
30 days for the second one. So obviously steep growth. What's a surprising thing that you learned? And that, like, when you look and you look back and you're like, man, I didn't think that would be something that I'd need to think about. But what's a surprising thing?
For me, it was understanding Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law says that work expands to fill space and time. Right?
Got it.
So if I give you 2 hours to take a test that only takes 1 hour, what happens? You take 2 hours to take the test. But if I give you 1 hour to do it, guess what's going to happen? You're going to finish the same test in 1 hour without any compromise of your results. And so for me, because I didn't have a deadline for my first book, guess what? It just kept going on and on and on. It was filling up the space and time that was available for it. Whereas with my second book, when I decided that I was going to write it, I sent out an email to my friends and said, if I do not have the first draft of this book to you in 30 days, then I will be giving you all free copies of the finished version. And so that was actually going to cost me, right? Now I was going to have to pay people essentially, and if I didn't accomplish it. And so I triggered what I call positive peer pressure. And once people said it's a bet, guess what happened? That short period of space and time, I figured out what I needed to write and I got it out. And was it perfect? Nope. But it was 80% right. And that was the first draft. And then I went and edited the 80%, knocked out the final 20, and bam, the second book was done. One book takes me 3 years. The other one takes me 30 days and some change, right? And so just understanding Parkinson's Law and realizing that all this information is in your head, and it's going to come out at the rate or the given the space, the amount of space that you provide for it.
Pressure makes diamonds. Pressure makes
diamonds. Yes.
And so, let me ask you, was the second book successful?
The second book, was it successful? For me, it opened up doors. I don't measure my book success by necessarily Amazon bestseller or anything like that.
No, I know you're a behind the scenes guy. So as you, follow me here. As you started taking 30 days to write these books, are they selling copies? I mean, do you have books that are selling, a couple hundred?
I have books that are selling thousands annually. Okay. Yeah.
Well, so here's why I asked that, and here's why that's fascinating, because I think there's this idea, because there's someone listening to this conversation right now who's like, well, if you put it out in 30 days, the quality might not be the same, or it might not be something that's going to sell, because, like if you're doing a work of art and you've got to spend so much time, it's kind of like, people think that if I'm putting an album out, I need to take 3 years to make this incredible album. I got to be Nas or something like that. But if you look at Drake, who's a top selling artist, or Jay-Z, these guys, remember, Jay-Z had a run. Yeah, Jay-Z was pulling out albums every summer. He had a new album and
he would do it in a week. He would do it in a week. It was every summer, but he would do it in a week.
Is that in fact the case? He was.
Yeah,
that's great. And I think people are very attached to this myth that art has to be this long, grueling process. Because one of the things I saw when I was doing some reading online, so Sarah Gruen, if you don't know her, she wrote the book Water for Elephants, right? It became critically acclaimed. It was a New York Times bestseller. They created a movie out of it. She wrote her book. She wrote the draft of her novel in 4 weeks. Because and there's countless other examples of that. Like, this is a book that became a movie. I mean, you have to sell a lot of books for someone to say, I want to turn that into a
Oh
movie, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so could you imagine, 1 month, today's what, January 30th? Could you imagine, someone getting really charged up and excited? And it's like, okay, 30 days from now, you will have a novel that will be the platform for a New York Times bestseller in a movie. Just
Yeah.
4 weeks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
A
yeah, yeah.
month from now. So that's on the table. And I love your example of the 3 years to 30 days, because there's this myth about the creation process that I think that is very persistent in our culture. So I wanted to say that, and the other question that I have for you is, before I jump into that, back to the surprising stuff. I want to share one for me. So one of the most surprising things, when I first met a mentor, because I had a mentor help me write my first book,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the surprising things was, before I put a word in a Word document or a pen to paper, he said, I want you to do three things. I want you to survey people to get the title of your book. I want you to buy the domain, make sure that domain is available. I want you to create a book cover before you write the book.
Mm.
And that blew my mind. And I was just like, oh, I thought you were going to tell me something completely different. But every time I've written a book, it's been that exact process. Why? Because you don't want to have a great title and this amazing book title, but you can't get the domain for it. Someone else has a domain and they're marketing something that's completely different
Or similar. Mm-hmm.
or similar, right? And the second thing is, no one knows this story, but once I got the book cover, I printed it out in color, and I cut it out and I posted on the windshield of my car. So when I was driving every day, I would
Mm-hmm.
basically see me on a book cover of a car. How safe it was, I don't know. But was it? If kids don't try this at home, but was it effective? Yes, because I
Yeah.
literally had to see that to see out into the highway, and it was like me seeing my future. Poor pedestrians, but it served its purpose. So it's interesting as people get on this journey, and there's so many things that come up that aren't counterintuitive to the myth of being an author.
Yeah.
So for you, because there's a lot of speakers who are interested in writing a book. And I know you said it helps you organize your thoughts and it helps event bookers have another option of booking you. Are there any other advantages as someone who gives public talks to have a book?
I mean, they're selling from the back of the room first and foremost, right? So you're speaking to an audience of 500, and you plant seeds throughout your speech, and you sell 100 books at $20 a book. All of a sudden, that speaking gig that was so much, you actually get another $2,000 cash probably to take home with you. So that's first and foremost. And then it allows people to talk about you, and it gives them something to take home, and to people who didn't come to the speech or chose not to, especially if it's a college campus, right? And so it increases your intrigue because now it's an artifact that is just there with them in their life. The other advantages, my books are also the infrastructure for my PowerPoints and my presentations. I'm basically just walking through the book at a high level, in a high level manner, because the framework that actually I use for the book is actually the framework for my presentation. It's the framework for my coaching. It's the framework for my consulting. It becomes a framework from which I build everything. I really believe in the power of frameworks. 7 habits of highly effective people. You have the 5 love languages, the 4 agreements. All of these are simple frameworks that people have built entire businesses on. You can write a framework on a post-it note. All you have to do is do Maslow's hierarchy of need framework. And all of a sudden you build this out and you describe what this is about, and it becomes a book, and it becomes the foundation of your business. And so, I talk about the freedom formula, and the F in the freedom framework is actually your framework. And then from there, you get into what are the results that your framework has created for other people, right? And then from there, you get into who is the eager audience for this framework, who else has this need. Then you get into your evergreen campaign. And then you get into these other elements that actually lead to the M, which is the money. And so it's really important that when I look at people, especially in the personal development space, and again, this is not for necessarily the fiction writers, but this is for the people who are writing nonfiction like yourself. It all starts with the framework. There have been so many businesses that have been built on a simple framework. Simon Sinek, you look at his golden circle and the TED talk that he did around that. Literally, it's some freaking circles, and the framework is amazing. It's some freaking circles, and he's been able to build $1 million plus business off of this. I think he charges like $50,000 for his beat. I don't even know, right? But it's off a little framework, and so when you actually put a book to this to actually describe the framework to people when they can't bring you in, because not everybody's going to be at the schools you speak at, not everybody's going to be at the companies you speak at. It gives other people access to actually understand what this framework is about and integrate it into their lives. And if you're really trying to build an amazing company, you want to figure out how to become part of people's everyday life. And so a book is a way to do that. When you look at the Bible, for example, the reason it's become so powerful, not only is it a spiritual text, but people have integrated it into their daily lives. And you want people to adopt your ideas and integrate it into their daily lives. Whether you're trying to teach them on the importance of gratitude and doing a gratitude journal, whether you're trying to teach them healthy eating habits, whatever it is you're trying to teach, you want it to become part of people's daily lives. And oftentimes that requires a book. Some people think it's this this ancient form of communication, but I still have books. I still buy books. I still read books, and they're powerful tools.
That's so interesting. And we're about to wrap up soon, but I like this idea of, and we'll talk about it more at the event, turning your book into something that is part of someone's everyday experience, right? And starting kind of with your framework and finding your eager audience. And even if you're a fiction writer, I think that you're still finding your eager audience, right? Because even if you're your book Butler and you're talking about certain science fiction thing, there's like a vibe for that, right?
Right.
So it's important. So I like this idea of having this everyday component and impacting people on that level. But so now, I want to say, Jullien, thank you so much for spending, your lunch break with me and
that's all good, man.
Answering these questions, man. This is really cool, and it's going to be valuable for the folks that are watching this. But I wanted to let people know about the event. What we're doing is on Thursday. I mean, if you got value from this event and this type of conversation, right? Conversations with authors, we're going to be doing this at a very high level. We have 3 authors that are going to be joining us. Well, really 5, because the event organizers, myself and Jeff, between us, we've written 5 books. But we've got 3 authors that are going to be joining us on Thursday, and it's going to be a conversation which is really going to touch on a lot of things you talked about. How do you get started? How do you find a great editor? How do you basically know when your book is good enough? How do you get your book out in the marketplace? How do you overcome some of these mistakes that first-time writers, experience? Not because of anything about them. It's something that they're first-time writers, right? So we're going to be talking about that, and how do you turn this idea that's inside of you to a finished product that's helping you, win speaking engagements, win new customers, win credibility in your field, give you the opportunity to present at different conferences, right? How do you do that? And it's the same thing that you talked about, positive peer pressure. So we've got, let me tell you about some of the folks we got joining us. Erica Buddington, she's been an HBO Deaf Poet, Poetry Slam champion. She's written 4 books. She's going to be one of our panelists. Alfred Edmond, he's the co-author of Loving in the Grown Zone. He's a co-creator of Grown Zone Relationship Education, SVP Executive Editor at large at Black Enterprise. For the folks interested in children's books, we've got Tyler Allen Jackson. Not only is he a publisher, because you talked about like you were trying to be an author and a publisher.
Yeah,
he's a guy he has a publishing company. He's a TEDx speaker, and he's a best-selling author of several children's books. And also just a great human being, Ty Allen Jackson. So they're going to be joining us for that conversation. It's really going to be a powerful event. There's going to be, wine open bar. It's going to be a really phenomenal event. So we're hoping that everybody takes an opportunity to come out and join us. It's going to be Thursday. Let me give for everyone who's listening the address here.
7 to 9
p.m. at 153 West 27th Street, on the 6th floor, Suite 604, New York. 1. So obviously we'll blast out the Eventbrite, but come out. And actually, if you listen to this, we're actually going to give you guys a discount code if you So we'll do for the discount code, just put focus group, FOCUSGROUP. So if you
Yeah.
put that in, you'll get a the percentage decreases based on the closer we get to the event, because we don't reward
Yeah.
procrastination. So right
We
now
do
it's a
not
30%.
reward procrastination.
Right now it's a 30% discount, but as we get closer to the event, it'll go down to probably 10. So if you take action,
Or no, 0. It should go down to 0.
right. So if you take action soon and you're really serious about it, you should be getting a 30% discount off the event. But yeah, it's conversations with authors.eventbrite.com. Again, conversations with authors.eventbrite.com. And hopefully we see you on Thursday and we can recreate this type of experience in an intimate setting with aspiring writers and just people who literally are there to pour into you. So Jullien, I can't thank you enough, man. I think it's going to be
no problem. Yeah, the reason I got up is because I just wanted to say that, look, I got Bert's book right here. I got Jeff, both of his books right here. This whole shelf over here, these 2 sections right here and right here are all my friends who are authors. So I say that to say that whoever's watching this, that this is possible for you. And that all of these people here have built businesses off of ink on pages. Wow. They've literally built businesses off of ink on pages. And I keep all of their books just as inspiration. And I didn't know that this call would come up and that Bert would invite me to share this because I can't be there at the actual event. But these people have built businesses. There are some bestsellers in here. This is what's possible for you. See Pam Slim's body of work. So I just want you to say you have to finish. You just have to get it out. You have to get out there.
Go artist ship.
Covered. And from there, you gotta ship and magic will happen. Magic will happen. After you write, you got to do the marketing. Okay. And Bert, he can actually educate you on how to actually get an Amazon bestseller. He's done it several times. So all that information is going to be at the event. And so Bert, thank you for your work. I know that so many people have their untold stories and frameworks that are in their lives that I know will benefit other people. And that's why I'm here. And even though I can't be at the event directly, I wanted to contribute in this way.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, man. Hopefully, you have a nice nourishing lunch, man. I appreciate you feeding the audience.
Yes, with food for thought,
man. With food for thought, man. So, to more authors and more people telling stories that change lives and make an impact. That's what we're really about. So, I'll talk to you soon, man. I can't say thank you enough, man.
No appreciate problem, you, brother. All love, man. What's up? Peace. Bye.